Zoom Community Issues Forum, sponsored by Christ Church Cathedral. Once again, we're not in the cathedral, but we're doing this by Zoom, and we'll continue to do that for a while. I was lucky enough to get my first COVID vaccine 2 days ago, so I'm feeling good about that. I hope some of you are succeeding with that as well. This forum is, I think this is the third forum we've done where we've had Hamilton County Commissioner Denise Driehaus and Council Member David Mann together talking about the issues that face both the county and the city in the coming year, both long and short term. And so we like this team of Driehaus and Mann, and so we wanted to keep that going. We usually, we've let off with that before, and somehow that slipped by us. So this is our second forum of 2021, but we can attribute that to this being a weird time. And but there's certainly plenty of issues to talk about. By the way, I'll put in an ad for 2 weeks from today. We have the Reverend Damon Lynch III, who's just put out a book called Becoming Joshua, which is a piece he's put together which combines his spiritual life with, really planning what a good community, how to build a good community in Cincinnati, in the Cincinnati area, especially for the African American community. So we look forward to that on the 11th of February. But today we forge ahead with the future of the county and the city. And of course, this has been a really strange year with a lot of horrible things happening, including the pandemic, which has had a major impact on some of our issues here in the county and the city. So I'm sure David and Denise will want to say something about that. We're going to lead off with our County Commissioner Denise Driehaus, who's also president of the commission, because she has to head off to a commission meeting by 1 o'clock. So we'll let her go first. But I know, David, you've joined us, so that's great. Denise, are you there? Yeah, you're there.
I am here. I appreciate the promotion, but I'm no longer the president of the commission. I am simply a commissioner. I had my 2 years, and now Commissioner Summer Odumas is the new president, just to clear the record. So as always, delighted to be here. Hello, David. David and we haven't seen each other in a long time, so it's good to see you. Always happy to share. Yeah, always happy to see you and share the stage at this forum. So I'll be brief. There is a lot going on. I'm curious to know what your questions are, but let me just say that it's been a very challenging year at the county related to the pandemic in particular, and so happy to answer any questions about that. But let me give you just a general overview and say that our numbers in Hamilton County are starting to trend down. That's good news. We had a bump from the holidays that was very unfortunate and put us into the purple range on the governor's map. My expectation is that today we will go back to red. Our indicators are trending down. We've seemed to have turned a corner here. I attribute that mostly because people are no longer getting together, right? I mean, the holidays were a disaster for us. And people did get together against the best advice of the health commissioner. And a lot of people got sick and a lot of people went into the hospital and passed away, to be honest. So we're in a phase right now where the vaccine is being made available to a certain extent. We don't have near enough doses to cover the folks that are eligible now and will become eligible in the coming weeks. According to the governor's rollout plan. We have desperately tried to talk to the governor, and I just talked to him yesterday about how this messaging that folks that are of a certain age, 80 and older last week, 75 and older this week, in Hamilton County, those are very large numbers of people, and we're getting a fraction of the doses we need to make sure that people get vaccinated that are eligible. So the numbers don't quite line up. It's been a constant frustration as we try to message to people down here about how to go about getting signed up and getting the vaccine. And so we have launched a common portal for that with the city. It's testandprotectcincy.com. On that portal, you will find all the providers in Hamilton County. It changes week to week, so you'll see those variations happen. A lot of the hospital systems are on there. They're getting the majority of the vaccine. Public Health City and Public Health County are both listed as well, as are the pharmacies that are getting some doses. And so if you've yet to get the vaccine or will soon becoming eligible, I would recommend that site and probably sign up more than once. That would be my recommendation to make sure that you get in the queue and you get the vaccine as quickly as possible. For those, especially seniors or those just that don't have internet access, we've set up a call line, a helpline 211, again, in conjunction with the city. United Way is our partner. They have been fantastic. Moira Weir is a rock star. We gave her 24 hours notice and that hotline was established. They've gotten thousands of calls into the hotline, and they help individuals navigate what I just described, these portals and getting in the queue. So it's challenging because we've got so few doses, but we are trying to do our best to at least coordinate the effort. And by the way, for your knowledge, public health, both city and county, and the health systems are ready and willing to receive more doses. And we have the capacity to do thousands more in Hamilton County than what we're doing right now. And to give you an estimate about that, last week we had about 8,000 doses. This week we've got about 11,000 doses. Next week we're down to about 9,000 doses. So you can see it's very hard to plan. But as eligibility expands, doses going down is not a very good scenario for us. So super challenging time here in Hamilton County. The upside, from my perspective, last year was the COVID relief that we as a county received because of our size. And we were able to help a lot of people in Hamilton County, especially related to rent assistance and small business assistance, rolled out multi-million dollar programs to try to assist. We have done a very robust testing program in Hamilton County that we stood up through the Health Collaborative. And so many of you have been involved, frankly, in trying to understand the needs in the county and then having our dollars match that need. We also distributed $25 million to the 49 jurisdictions, including the city of Cincinnati, who got 17 million of that money because they did not get direct allocations from the federal government. And so we felt it was incumbent upon us to try to help out because everybody has a need, whether it's first responders or PPE or any of the rest of it. So that's kind of my COVID update. And then just briefly, let me mention that I think last time I was here, I think we talked about taxes, which is one of my favorite topics, of course. But we have finally now started to see the additional quarter of a cent that Todd and I passed about a year and a half ago now. And so that those dollars are finally starting to roll into the county coffers. It has allowed us to pay everybody $15 an hour, to give everybody a raise, a cost of living raise, which we were not doing prior to my getting here. We had 5 years of nobody getting a raise, and you can imagine what that does to morale. It's not great. And we also have been able to look a little bit, not much, but a little bit into areas where we've not been able to do much, which is economic development, and especially community development in like Mount Healthy, Lincoln Heights, Forest Park, Anderson Township, places like that. So we've become a more robust partner. And the other thing we're doing is launching a housing task force that will respond to the housing study that was done through the community building. I almost said, Karen, I almost said community learning, which I know is not right. But through Liz Bloom and Kathy Schwab with LISC, and trying to respond to what we know is an identified need, which is affordable housing, not only in the city, but throughout the county. And so we have set aside money against the reserve to respond to whatever recommendations come out of that task force. But finally, the county through our own dollars, we'll start to respond to that need. We've already been allocating money from the federal government through CDBG and other sources, but this is a way for us to get more involved in a real way. So I'm proud of that work. More to come on that. But I think it is a recognition of this county commission that we've got a lot of work to do in that space. So I'm going to leave it there, Bill. Thanks for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to hearing from David.
Good. And David, if you could do a brief overview, and then we would have time for some questions, and Denise could be involved in that.
Sure. Well, Denise has been a great partner with the city, particularly in the time of pandemic, and I love to hear her talk. She masters the issues and presents the political world in such a positive way. So thank you. I guess the first thing, the most recent news at City Hall has to do with the Blue Ribbon Commission or task force that the mayor appointed yesterday to help deal with the problems on development deals at City Hall. This is the implementation of legislation that I presented in November and was adopted unanimously. Basically, the mayor appointed 9 really good appointees, I think, to the commission, who have the job of looking at our development process, comparing our practices with the practices around the country, talking with community members, looking at the role of council members in negotiating development deals, et cetera. And the chair of the committee is retired Hamilton County Judge Anne Marie Tracy, who I'd forgotten this, had been also at some point in her career chair of the State Ethics Commission. So she knows the stuff, and she has had the experience of reviewing complaints, violations under state law. And of course, all of us, the state rules apply to us. And so we're fortunate to have her. And she indicated at the press conference yesterday that she and the committee are determined to come up with some serious recommendations and do a thorough job. Their meetings are going to be public, online, and there'll be plenty of opportunity for involvement by the public, including proposals, information, and the like. Other members include UC Law School Dean Verna Williams, former council member, county commissioner, and judge Guy Guckenberger, a Republican. We've got a young, I've got a list here someplace, but it's those are the ones that come. A developer, Dan Schimberg, who is Uptown Properties and has had a lot of experience in that context of negotiations with the city. And we decided, originally the legislation said no one who was connected to development. But if you think about reforming the relations between the city and developers, that doesn't make sense. And if you get somebody like Schimberg, who has a very positive reputation, he can help us a lot, I think. Tim Burke, Democratic Party, former Democratic Party chair, but also someone who's represented developers and represented community groups and has sort of been on both sides of these issues. So I think we're going to have a serious look here and try to see what needs to be changed. And, you know, I was first appointed to council. Ted Berry was the mayor. Charlie Taft was still on council. Bobby Stern was near the beginning of her career. And the thought that they would ever be in a position of soliciting or receiving a bribe, I mean, it just shows you how much somehow we've changed. At that time, we had a well-earned reputation as the best governed city in the country. In some way, somehow, we need to get back to that. And this is one tool that will get us there. There obviously are others, but Guy Guckenberger made the point yesterday that in his time on council, which was the better part of 20 years, and he and I overlapped quite a bit, he doesn't recall ever meeting privately with a developer. And yet when I came back to council 7 years ago, the norm is that as development deals are approaching presentation to council, developers and their lobbyists meet privately, separately with members of council. And I think what's happened is, as developers suggest ways that the deal could be improved, one or more members of council have taken it upon themselves to be champions of that developer or this developer privately with the administration. That puts the administration in a very difficult position. And what we want to get back to is the commitment to the professionalism of the city manager and his or her staff, and leave it to them to develop deals pursuant to policies that the council develops. And one of the problems has been there have been inadequate explicit policies about exactly what we expect to achieve in our developments. I mean, generally, obviously, we want development, we want jobs, we want improvements in the neighborhoods, affordable housing, and all the rest. But we haven't explicitly set it out the way that we need to. And so the development officers, the city manager leads development, comes to us and says publicly, this is what we propose. And one of the changes has to be that we take more time publicly with what's proposed. And that's the way it used to be done, and there are reasons for that. And this is a practice around the country in some of the best governed cities. So this is a big deal. We expect to hear from the commission by August 1st, which will give us time, if we need to propose charter amendments. I'm sure there'll be ordinances that are implemented. We asked them to look at things like a code of conduct for developers and members of council, to look at whether developers should be prohibited from making contributions to council members or mayor candidates in the 2 years before development is presented to council, or whatever the appropriate time is. So I'm very optimistic that this can help begin to restore, once the group does this work, restore some of the confidence that we've lost in council and in city hall. If the public doesn't trust us, that makes the rest of what we need to do very difficult. Now, just very quickly, the other things that we are concerned about are related to the pandemic, obviously, in all its aspects, and the aftermath of George Floyd. It gets to be a long list of things. People don't appreciate sometimes how complicated and how lengthy the budget process is. We're on a budget year that ends June 30. So we are now beginning to develop the budget for the year that begins July 1. And the budget performance through the end of October has us with a surplus over projected revenues of $16 million, but it has an excess of expenditures over projections of $14 million. So what in $2 million is not much of a surplus to have on hand. And interestingly, a lot of the extra expenses are related to pandemic matters. Police and fire, we're having a lot of officers in both forces that, given the challenges of providing services in the time of COVID, are they're eligible to retire, and they're deciding to retire. For one thing, we're having both forces missing work because of COVID. So that's all to explain all the extra money we're having to spend to maintain our desired levels of police service and fire services. As Denise mentioned, the pandemic is creating really an economic distress for folks that pay rent. There are eviction prevention programs that the city has also provided funding into to try to hold that off for folks. There was a report this morning, I think, that the country's economic growth is the lowest since the Second World War. That doesn't necessarily bode well, and we're all going to be somewhat captive to what the consequences are of the Biden administration's initiatives. And we hope at some point that some of what the Biden administration does is find a way to provide support for the lost revenues of local government, because that's serious also. We have a issue that is not yet resolved. What happens if you have been working in the city of Cincinnati, you live in Blue Ash, and now your employer permits you to work at home? Does the city of Cincinnati continue to benefit from the wage tax on the wages that the city taxes you if you live in the city or if you earn your wage in the city? Where do you earn your wage if you're providing the services in Blue Ash? There's some litigation that may take that away from us, and it'll have a terribly negative impact on the city. And it may continue because post-pandemic, I don't know that we understand exactly to what extent employers are going to bring their folks back downtown in the central city. So I should stop there too for questions. I mean, obviously we got a lot on our plates, pandemic related, impact on restaurants, and how many restaurants can close, how many can survive this time. The city has done a lot to provide dining opportunities on streets and the like to try to save our restaurant industry in some fashion. Anyway, let me stop there.
Well, let's open this up for questions for both Commissioner Driehaus and Councilmember Mann. Who wants to lead off? Yes, Elizabeth Brown.
Yes, I'd like to ask Mr. Mann about the development and the task force. It seems like the focus is just on the process and what I would consider sort of the security of the process, rather than the fact that the biggest problem is that we have such a huge giveaway to developers. So I guess the question is the task force going to be looking at the policies that the city council could establish, things like you don't give to high-end developers and if they're not willing to put affordable housing in? And I think it's really been brought to people's attention because of the huge amount of taxpayer subsidy in that Liberty and Elm project that is just, I mean, the numbers are gigantic, and a 30-year tax abatement just seems so inappropriate. Is there any reason city council just can't say, if you're getting taxpayer subsidy, then you need to have affordable housing?
Well, one of the things we ask him to look at is, and this is a more complicated sentence than it needs to be, determine how well and with what clarity the city establishes and then achieves its goals in providing public incentives. And I think I alluded to the fact that sometimes we haven't been very good. I mean, we pay lip service to the need for affordable housing. And one of the things that we're going to act on in the next few weeks is Greg Landsman's proposed scorecard for what he calls balanced development. And the idea, and we're still working on the details of the scorecard, but the idea would be that we establish in writing a series of goals that we want scored with respect to projects come to us. It would include affordable housing of various categories. It would include environmental sensitivity. It would include equity in wages. It would include economic inclusion. It would include engagement with community groups. And you score each of those categories. And so when so those are the directions for the city administration. And then when the deal comes to us, the administration will be expected to say, okay, based on our scorecard, here's what we have, and this is why we recommend it to you or not. And then we can say, okay, we're satisfied that our goals have been achieved, or they haven't. And if not, we can talk about change. I mean, it's no secret that the affordable housing shortfall in the city of Cincinnati, depending on, Denise alluded to the report, is 26,000, 28,000. And there are different categories of affordable housing based on area median income, what percentage you have to spend of your income on that. And that's a big time shortfall. And to meet it requires a lot of different things. Requires a lot of tax support from the federal government, tax support from the state of Ohio, and thoughtful use of our tax abatement programs. On the other hand, I mean, tax abatement is not giving away money we have. Tax abatement, it says, if you do something that we want, instead of paying the taxes are available to fund the project. So it reduces your cost, yes. But if the reality is, and this is always where it gets hard, will a development take place without abatement? If it won't, then we're not giving away anything because we won't have a development there. So it's a really challenging explanation that's the fact. We're not taking, like for Liberty and Elm, and I think there are going to be some changes, I understand, in what's dealt with in council next week. So we're going to achieve some of what's being talked about. But we're not taking the tax abatement benefit there is something like $20 million, which I agree is huge. But we're not taking $20 million in money in the coffers and saying, here, this supports your project. We're saying if your project goes forward, in lieu of paying those taxes over 30 years, you are able to use those revenues for the project. And this is all where it's always questionable for those that are suspicious whether the analysis that the developer does about it can't be done without this kind of support is valid or not. And that's where we rely on our professionals in the development department.
David,
I'll just have to
Burdell,
say, as somebody,
just an observation, from a planner standpoint, Greg Landsman's scorecard is nowhere near as good as the Peasley development process. I urge you to look at it and consider that too.
Okay, and I know Greg has, and I know that his scorecard is very much a work in progress.
I just wanted to say that as someone who's paid my property taxes this week, it does really hurt those of us that are paying to see so many wealthy developers and wealthy homeowners not paying much at all. So it's really a fairness issue in a long, long way.
I understand that. In really two different categories between the residential abatements for newly constructed 1 and 2 family, mostly 1 family homes. That's quite different because often that construction would take place anyway, and we have put some caps on what's available there on the one hand, and developments in neighborhoods that otherwise wouldn't take place. So. We're going to be talking about that a lot in the next year, I assure you.
Peter Haynes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. A couple quick questions regarding Elm and Liberty. Have there been other tax abatements that lasted 30 years?
Yes.
I thought the norm was.
It's not the norm, but yes.
Pardon?
It's not the norm, but yes.
Thanks. Regarding the 17 million that Commissioner Driehaus talked about, are those funds that can be applied generally to the city, or are they targeted for pandemic-related activities?
Let me take that one. So all the money from the CARES Act from the federal government had to be related to COVID-19. It had to be in response to COVID-19. And so those dollars had to be used by the city, as it did for every other jurisdiction, including the county, in our response to the pandemic.
Can you say a little bit more about the county's affordable housing program? Well, and whether or not the city of Cincinnati can access it?
Well, so I can only say what I know, which is that we're trying to do more. We have redirected some of our federal dollars to respond to the need for affordable housing, but it's not enough. It's just a small amount. And so the task force that I referred to will start work. It's around mid-year. We've set aside some money to get started, depending on what the recommendations are. I don't have any preconceived notion about what the recommendation is going to be as far as how the county can get more involved here and be helpful and do some partnering. So I will say, though, that the CDBG dollars and all the federal dollars that we get from the county have to be spent outside the city. because the city also gets CDBG dollars, and their money obviously is spent inside the city. And so it's a bit of an equity issue. And so we have plenty of need outside the city. And so that's where our dollars go.
Thank you. One more quick one, David.
Sure.
Does this task force that's going to look at the corruption issue, is that an opportunity for the city to strengthen its community engagement and maybe even turn it into a rigorous program?
Peter, I think it's more likely to come out of Greg Landsman's scorecard development, because one of the areas that is going to be specified is community engagement.
Right. Thank you. Thank you both.
Councilman Mann,
Yes.
I was wondering, could you give an estimate on how many emergency ordinances council passes in a year and why so many are needed?
Yeah, most of them are emergency, and I've never embraced this as a serious issue. We've decided we want to pass a law, and often there's real utility in going ahead and implementing the law. And the only, to my knowledge, the only relevance of whether it's emergency or not is if there's opposition to it. And if it's not an emergency, opponents have 30 days to circulate petitions and so forth. So I think it would make us tremendously inefficient to therefore conclude that we should rarely use the emergency clause, because most often nobody cares, and there's a public benefit to moving faster. And I've never seen us. And one thing that's done that now that wasn't done years ago is that when an emergency clause is added, there's language explaining why, with some specificity, there's deemed to be an emergency. But in my time on council, I don't recall ever, and maybe there's an exception to this, but I don't recall any group saying you should not have an emergency clause here because you're going to go circulate petitions. So we therefore haven't really had a serious debate about whether there's a valid emergency in a particular case. Now, I guess the counter argument would be, well, we shouldn't have to decide before we take a look at the legislation that you're passing.
How many signatures are required, and how many would you estimate in a given year emergency ordinances is council typically passing?
Most of them are emergency. I have no idea offhand how many that is, and how many signatures. It's related to some percentage of the vote count, I think, in the last gubernatorial election. I think it ends up being a surprisingly low amount, but it's still a lot of signatures, 5,000 to 6,000 or something like that.
One question I have related to some of the issues of poverty that have been really shown to be very difficult because of the pandemic as well, but they've been existing for a long time. Has the city and the county counted too much on the federal government? I mean, since the Reagan era, basically, you've had a loss of federal funding for safety net issues. Does the city and the county need to take a better look at those issues because it impacts so many residents of this area, and really begin doing a better job of allocating money in that direction itself?
So I've just taken turns with you, David. So we have a lot of safety net services, primarily through JFS, which is the recipient of the dollars you're talking about. But the other way we help address poverty in this community is through the levies. And we've got 7 levies, as you know: indigent care, levy for people with disabilities, children's services, senior services. And so of those 7, the county commission in my 4 years here have asked the voters to vote on an increase for 2. Seniors was 1 and children was the other. We felt it was necessary to create some balance. Do they all need an increase? Yep, they all need an increase. They haven't been increased in decades. Imagine, because think about, how that plays out here. And so we decided, Todd and I really decided to take a pretty balanced approach to it and address where we thought the need was greatest. And so senior services, trying to keep seniors in their homes and out of nursing homes to provide very basic services was one. And then we've done a lot when it comes to keeping kids safely at home, as opposed to getting a call into JFS and removing the child immediately without really understanding, is there a danger, and is there something we can do to keep that child safely at home to keep them out of the system. It's challenging, right? Because we want to keep kids safe, but we've done a lot, especially when it comes to kinship care. We've put our money where our mouth is on that. And so there is, I guess you probably already know this, that there is this group that between, when if the child gets removed, instead of going directly into the system, they are placed with kin. And we have put dollars behind that to make sure that those kin receive a stipend so that they're able to do that, similar to the stipend to a foster care family, because it's just fair, right? And it's better for the child. So we've done quite a bit of work in that space. And then this idea to be a little more proactive with families that have significant challenges to try to keep the kids safely at home to begin with, before we start to move them into the foster care system, which is very difficult and challenging for kids and parents for that matter. So that's an example of where the county has struck out in a little bit of a different way, in lieu of getting increased dollars from the feds.
And I would, if I could, I would add that one of the things that's happened, and I saw that Gina Marsh is on participating. The revenues we devote to human services have increased dramatically in the last 7 years, and I think Gina came with Kurt Reiber and asked for an ordinance which I authored, and it was passed, which requires us to get back to 1.5% of our general fund revenues being spent on human services. I think we're at I lose track, 1.314. It's coming up each year. And that's back in 1981. I happened to be mayor when I signed the resolution that was authored by Bobby Stern, stating as public policy of the city, we wanted to spend that 1.5%. And in difficult budget years along the way before I came back, we fell far below that, and we're working our way back up. And but that's not all we spend on human services. You take a look at our overall budget. We spend so much. A lot of things are not human services. Monies tend to be the monies that we appropriate to freestanding nonprofit organizations. We have a process of evaluation. We rely importantly on the United Way and the Human Services Chamber of Commerce. But completely separately from that, we spend money in our recreation department. We spend money in our health department that meets the fundamental human needs of people. But yeah, particularly in the time of the pandemic, particularly given our statistics, that's one of the reasons we created a childhood poverty task force devoted to trying to bring 5,000 families out of poverty. And that's been turned over to the Project Lift that has support from the city, support from the private sector, and is achieving some good. But when your poverty rates are as high as they are in the city, we sure have a long way to go. There's no doubt about that. And fortunately, the levies that Denise mentioned are, of course, countywide levies. City residents happily pay, and city residents happily, based on need and so forth, participate in the benefits. But we have a tremendous long-term issue in our society. Are we going to meet fundamental human needs of everybody or not? And
Councilman Mann, I had a question about my understanding is that the city has 20 million from last year's HUD funds that haven't been allocated. I was wondering if you could talk about the status of that.
I'm not familiar with that. Are you talking about CDBG money or?
I just know that it's HUD money. That's my understanding.
if that's true, sometimes there's we're on a fiscal year that begins July 1. The feds are on a fiscal year that ends starts in October, and so sometimes the years don't line up. But I'm not aware that we got $20 million sitting there that we're saving in a bank account. We wouldn't be allowed to do that. I'll be glad to, give me a little more information. I'll be glad to get you an answer on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Somebody just handed me a question having to do with, that would be both the city and the county, the Metropolitan Sewer District, and how that's coming along in terms of cooperation. And,
So David, you take this one. No, I'm just kidding. No. So we've actually, let's remind everyone that we did have an agreement. I don't remember when that was, a few years ago, went to the state for some support, and we didn't get it from OPERS primarily. And it was our effort to try to preserve the retirement system that's been set up by the city, the CRS system, which is unique to Cincinnati. I love that about Cincinnati. Nobody else has their own retirement system like we do. But anyway, we at the county said, hey, we're going to do a solid for the city here and try not to disrupt that system. Went to OPERS, said, hey, give us an exception. They said no. So the agreement fell apart. We have offered a couple of alternatives since then. They have not been embraced by the city, although they still do try to preserve that retirement system in the workforce. But regardless, we have not made a lot of progress since then related to the structure. That said, we are moving along with consent decree projects. We are moving along with asset management projects. We are providing relief to seniors when it comes to rates. It is allowable by law in the state of Ohio, and we have done that. There are other things that are not allowable by law that we've been asked to push for. And so Cecil Thomas is likely to introduce some legislation to provide a broader footprint for that kind of relief for individuals that are really struggling to pay those bills. So more to come on that, but we've got lots of community advocates asking us to do that work as we continue to struggle with the structure of MSD in general.
I might, so the former director of the MSD, Gerald Checco, retired, and I'm very blessed to have his services as my chief of staff. So anytime I have a question about MSD, I turn to Gerald because he knows the stuff, and it's complicated because of the obligations of the consent decree, the money that's involved, and it's complicated because of this weird arrangement that we have. And I salute Denise for all the effort she's put into making our work together as cooperative as possible. She and I spent months and months and months meeting every Tuesday morning with Judge Barrett, who has the case. And as Denise says, we struck a deal, and there was no way we could persuade the powers that be in Columbus to support it. So we have the continuing challenge of wanting to protect the city's pension system and finding a way to make MSD viable going forward.
I have a question, probably for David. When I go around the city, I see a lot of 3CDC signs and everything. Where do they get their money? How does 3CDC fit in with the city? How do they have just go ahead and do their own projects, or how does that work together?
3CDC is a nonprofit organization substantially supported by the business community and a major player, and particularly in OTR, but more so in recent years in downtown development. Project by project, the city participates or doesn't participate with them. Project by project, they obtain support elsewhere. I have the highest regard for Steve Leeper and what 3CDC does. They're very good at analyzing deals and giving us sound information, honest brokers about things. So, you know, the things you see, they took over for instance, the renovation of Music Hall and managed the construction. They manage Washington Park. They oversaw the renovation of the park and the garage and so forth. They manage Fountain Square, the garage, and the plaza. They're involved in the construction along 4th Street of what used to be the Pogues garage. So they're very useful, and I'm just grateful we have them. And when the city puts money into a project, we have a lot of say of what it should be and what its goals are.
Does the city have enough accountability from them? Because I'm wondering about the park in over the Rhine, which almost seemed to be built in opposition to the residents there, and just went ahead with putting in new regulations that really were opposed by most of the people, older residents living there.
In Washington Park?
Yes, yes.
You know, that was all done before I came back to council, so I'm not familiar with what the debates were. I mean, whatever the issues were, they've been silent since then. I don't know whether there's more confidence in what they did or not. And you know, that's I mean, I think that's probably a fair issue. On the other hand, you know, we don't have any membership on their board. I don't even know offhand what the board consists of. But our to the extent we invest money with them, that's where we are able to hold them accountable. But otherwise, they're sort of a free agent, and there are issues from time to time.
Councilman Mann, over the many years, we've seen this funding for basic services cut down. And in recent times, our city has vastly increased the amount of restricted funds that can only be spent on development and infrastructure and cutting basic services at the same time. Is this a trend that will continue, or do you think that we can get back to a focus more on some of the basic services?
Help me, Justin. What transfers are you talking about from the general fund to restricted funds? I'm not sure I necessarily understand what you're saying.
Well,
is the premise of the question.
Well, for instance, you know, the TIF funds, you know, we're shifting funds to TIF funds for development. We take a lot of money basically out of the operating budget. We're so focused on doing development that we've cut our basic services.
Well, but TIF funds don't consist of monies that are transferred out of the general fund. TIF funds, by definition, are the taxes attributable to improvements in a particular district. Now you can ask whether the monies in the TIF funds are being used for the right things. And one of the things we did in the budget last June was, for the first time, declare that district TIF funds, 25% of them must be used for affordable housing, nothing else. So that's a big increase in our revenues available for affordable housing. You know, in addition to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund that's funded with the revenues from the Airbnb tax and so forth.
One question for both of you. Another topic that's a regular has been Metro. What's the new levy do? How's the city and the county going to work together on that?
So we have established a new board. Remember that the funding source went from the city earnings tax to the countywide sales tax. So the majority of the board is now county appointed. There's a significant minority membership that's city appointed. So the board has been put in place. It's a very diverse group intentionally. and they're from all over the county. Definitely have bus riders on there, folks with disabilities, people of different walks of life. And so that was really important so that we better understand the needs in the community related to public transportation. So there will be more money now going into the pot related to the bus routes themselves, trying to do more connectivity kind of across the county as opposed to the hub and spoke where you have to come downtown, transfer, and then go back out. And so it'll hopefully be more efficient to get people from their homes to their jobs and back. The other piece of it was infrastructure. And so there's quite a bit of money coming to the city and the county for infrastructure work that is related to metro. So what does that mean? Well, it's within a certain distance of a bus route. And so that's good. You know, we all are keen on providing more money for infrastructure as we have this aging infrastructure system throughout the county. So that money will run through the integrating committee. There is a metrics by which they decide which projects are going to be funded. And so there are already plenty of road and bridge projects in the queue. The matter is of providing more money then for that fund so that they get done more quickly. So that is the update. They just started meeting. I think they just had their first meeting last week. And so they're moving right along.
We're moving toward the end of the forum. Any last minute questions or visionary future wishes from our council member and county commissioner, long-term things that you think need to be attacked? Focused
So you're soliciting questions and then you want to know.
Well, yeah, I just wanted some further,
Sure.
maybe remarks on your visions for the future.
So I'm just going to weigh in because I've got to jump off here in about 2 minutes. And thanks again for hosting this forum. I'm so sorry we're not in person. I don't know if you've noticed, I'm literally eating my lunch while I'm sitting here because this is a lunchtime event. But my one thing I neglected to mention that's been a really big priority for the county is our work when it comes to racial justice and criminal justice. And so, as you may know, we passed a resolution to declare racism a public health crisis in the county. Very quickly, some things came from that. One was increased training, especially in the sheriff's department. It's called active bystander training. The other one is the expansion of the Office of Economic Inclusion and Equity to make sure that we are doing business with everybody that lives in the county. And the other one, importantly, and this is kind of my ad, was a disparity study for the county. The city's way ahead of some of the stuff, and I am a lot of admiration for that. But we are conducting a disparity study in the county to level set the conversation, see how we're doing, which, by the way, is not very good, and do better. And give us the mechanisms to do better. And so it is a big push. We started last year. Victoria Parks was the one that initiated it. But that's a big deal for the county. It's a real culture shift for this county. Things are really shifting here. It's very obvious, I think, just by looking at the board. But we have partners now across the street at the court system. A lot of judges got elected that have very forward-thinking ways of doing criminal justice work. And so we'll do more with reentry. We've got 90 beds coming online over in the Justice Center for treatment. It's a very, very different approach to criminal justice here and addiction and mental health issues. So I'm really looking forward to that. The other thing is the relationship with the city. I'm hopeful that will improve. It's challenging. I mean, it's naturally challenging, but I'm always optimistic, especially with David over at the city, that we can do better in this relationship. We actually do a lot together, which goes unnoticed, I think, but there's room for improvement for sure. And so I look forward to that and working with all of you. A lot of you have informed a lot of what we are doing. So thanks for that.
Well, thank you, Denise, for all you do and for joining us today. David, do you want to add to that?
Well, I love working with Denise, so I echo that, and we will do more together. The pandemic has been a huge detour for a lot of great things that were going on in our city. Neighborhood business district by neighborhood business district, you see some amazing growth and improvement. neighborhood by neighborhood, you see some amazing developments. At the same time, we all recognize that if our city is to be all that we want it to be, we've got to bring everybody along. And, you know, so much of my thinking about the city is driven by the Urban Link study of a few years ago that documented the extent to which we are we are a tale of two cities, black and white, and look at the demographics of infant mortality, life expectancy, housing, education, unemployment. If you allow yourself to get caught up in it, it's very depressing. But that out of that depression has to be a call for a response. And as soon as we can get past where we are right now, have funding streams that are more consistent, I think we can return to the path we were on, improve our population, attack affordable housing, attack childhood poverty. I mean, some good things have happened. The preschool promise, which impacted our taxes by a lot, but which is a very good thing. It's up for renewal this year. So our better days are ahead of us. I really believe that. And I have to believe that as a public official. What's the point otherwise of working at it?
Any other final critical questions from anyone? David, you gave a good intro for our next forum in 2 weeks, which is the Reverend Damon Lynch talking about his new book or booklet, Becoming Joshua, which lays out a pathway for building a more just and equitable, especially African-American community here in Cincinnati. So come back for that discussion and the ideas he has for Cincinnati. Anyway, it was wonderful having the two back again to look ahead to the future of the city and the county. And we look forward to seeing all of you in 2 weeks. So
thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Everybody's going away. See you tomorrow, Tom.